So today I'd like to take you behind the scenes of the Museum of Everywhere and Nowhere, which is the project that I've been working on during my field trip residency. It also predated the residency by a bit, and in having been funded by the Canada Council Digital Originals Grant. So what this is a digital collection of bits and pieces of my life and bits and pieces of my studio. I am not finished constructing it, but as you can see, it's broken down by location, and each of these locations represent a particular trip that I took in the past. So it is a mixture of artifacts that I've witnessed, things that I've actually purchased and brought home with me. I talk about the stories behind these objects in this sort of interactive website, and also in places where these trips and the things that I brought back from the trips gave rise to work that ended up actually in the gallery in my sculptural practice. For instance, this piece called the River Dragon. Um, I have also mixed in quite a bit of sketchbooks from my various travels. I almost always keep a field notebook whenever I'm in the field doing, either doing a residency or even if I'm just someplace for installation for a while, because, travel has always been something that has stirred my blood, at least. And this is sort of one of the first chances that I've really had to share some of these background notebooks with people, because there's not really anywhere else that they're on display or anything. They're just being my private journals and such. But lots of bits and pictures of bits and pieces of things I found along the way, and pictures of things I encountered. Notes, thoughts to self. And if you go to visit the site, you can peruse these obviously at your own leisure. And just get a little bit of a sense of some of the places where I've been, and the impact they had on me and the sort of impressions left behind. For instance, this Amazonian journal, animals are really hard to track down and even harder to get to sit still when you're wanting to draw something. So there's a lot of pictures of plants and specimens and such like that. And uh, this was my contraband of some of the foodstuffs whose seeds I saved and brought back with me to Montreal. Which probably shouldn't admit that on camera, but I guess I'm admitting it on camera. I also There are a number of images from museums that I visited in the past, and sort of some of my thoughts. Oh, well, my thoughts haven't been written into this one yet. You can see the lorem ipsum text standing placeholder for the piece I will write about this. But yeah, so that is a really brief kind of tour through some of the pieces of this museum. I'll take you down into one more section because this one's more finished. So this was the very famous Natural History Museum that is in Berlin. And I got a chance to go in 2016 when I was working on a show in Leipzig, and I passed through Berlin. So again, in this section, I've got illustrations that I've done based on photographs that I took in the museum, and you're, again, when the site is up, you can go and cruise through it at your leisure and read some of the text that I wrote. This museum in particular is probably the most unabashed about taking pride in and displaying the methods, materials, techniques, and the sort of behind the scenes of the museum itself of how natural history displays happen. And to me, that's just the best thing ever, because so much of that influences the work that I make. This is a scan of a sketchbook that I had with me at the time, and I drew actually one of the few specimens of quagga that exist in the world. And a quagga was a species or subspecies of zebra that is only stripy in the front and quote unquote naked in the back, so it's really distinct looking. But the last one to live died in the 1880s, I believe, in a zoo in London. And I made a whole installation around this idea of the quagga, because even though it went extinct over 100 years ago, you can actually see them in theory living in Cape Town, where I used to live in South Africa, because they were part of an experiment to breed back a lost species. And so they managed to recover the phenotype of the species. So they got the look back, but you can never get the genotype back of something you've lost. So extinction is really forever. And just given the whole long, complicated history of South Africa itself, this sort of idea of like regretting a decision that you made and pressing rewind and pressing rewind and then pressing play again to see if you can have a different outcome the next time, obviously has a certain amount of poetic resonance to me. So I kind of kept coming back to it as an idea. um, the the museum in Berlin also has some wonderful specimens that were not actually specimens of the also extinct dodo bird. And the specimens, I can't remember if it's because there are none existing in the world or just that Berlin didn't have one and they wanted one, but they actually made a dodo based on sort of historical records. But it's actually cobbled out of modern birds. So it's like ostrich feathers make its tail, and like goose feathers and things. Like it's a sort of chimera of a bird made out of real things that refers to a real thing, but is not actually that real thing. So that as well is something that really kind of tickles my imagination. Um, and then just sort of the idea of objects that are so hyper realistic but not entirely finished, and the not entirely finishedness of them kind of calling into question both their reality and also their sort of their mode of manufacture. So all of the texts in here are sort of meditations on that. So I guess I'll leave it at that. I think by the time that you will have seen this website will be live, and you can find it if you just Google the Museum of Everywhere and Nowhere and Emily Jan. It's on the platform Prezi, or you can go to my website, emilyjan.com, and I will link to it from there. Thanks for joining me again. Ta-ta for now.